This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's 6 after on this Thursday. Thank you for dialing in the program. Greatly appreciate your support. Brought to you in part this hour by Consumers Mutual Insurance. Consumers Mutual, a different kind of insurance because it's a co-op. It's the insurance company I selected for myself and my family. You can find out more at consumersmutual.org. Check it out and tell them I sent you. The Common Sense hotline, 888-900-9966. Now, a good friend of mine yesterday, and I had lunch, and he's a writer, and I like the work that he does. And he handed me something yesterday, and he said, he's not really seeking any publicity, so he didn't want his name out there. But I decided, he wrote an invitation to the candidates. He wrote an invitation to the candidates that I thought, I read it, and I think that it identifies with a lot of the things that you and I want, and that he wants, and that the American people want, the voters want in this country. And I thought I would share those thoughts with you because I think it's spot on. Because having voted in many elections, I've come to the conclusion that what I think rarely matters, what candidates promise rarely happens. And the pre-election speeches, well, let's be honest, they're mothballed until the next campaign. They sounded great, but then they're put on ice until the next campaign. When the incumbent's opponent provides the public with unflattering visuals of broken promises, and it all starts over again. So how about a suggestion, or a series of suggestions, as it were, for candidates running for public office this coming election? Rather than flood the airways with advertising promises and delivering speeches with political sound bites and platitudes, maybe some of the candidates could find the moral courage in the mettle to address the following. On accountability, are you capable of making tough decisions while accepting the consequences of those decisions? And should something go awry with your strategies or policies or directives, will you avoid blaming others and accept responsibility for what happened on your watch, on your recommendation, on your course of action? Conversely, should something go right, are you willing to share credit with others, no matter what their political affiliation? Can you say, hey, it took teamwork? Remember that with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill? Adversaries from 9 to 5 would have dinner together. Didn't agree on a lot of things, but when they did, they weren't ashamed to tell people, hey, Tip and I put this deal together, would say Reagan. And Tip O'Neill, in his kind of Irish Catholic begrudging way, he took a shine to Reagan. Do you remember those days? Do you? Because I do. On clarity, can you be clear, concise, fair, and realistic? Which is key. Realistic in your deliberations. Avoiding clever deceptions and sound bites and using obtuse language. Just trying to confuse people. Well, it's not what I said. Of course it's what you said. Don't parse words. It's what you said. Own it. Will you avoid those who suggest you conceal your agenda? Well, don't tell them the truth. Why not tell them the truth? Explain it to us. Trust me, most of us aren't that stupid. And when you're challenged for something you said, when you're held to account on things you said where you planted your flag, will you back up your statement with facts instead of reading a script that allows you to hide behind some out-of-context defense? Will you say, this is what I meant, and this is what I mean, and this is where I make my stand, and this is who I am as a person, who I am politically, and who I intend to be for you, the voters. Can you do that for us? Can you? On compassion. Are you willing to stand up for those whose station in life is well below that which you have been given or you have attained? Will you engage the disenfranchised and defend those who cannot defend themselves? Will you be selfless in this way? Will you give of yourself in that way? Not looking for anything, in fact. Not a pat on the back and not an extra vote, but can you just do the right thing? On integrity. Do you have the moral compass necessary to make decisions, hard decisions, regardless of politically correct agendas, special interest group pressure, or man-made arguments challenging time-honored tenets of this nation? Simply put, are you true to yourself? On faith. Will you refuse to genuflect to those whose God is a kaleidoscope of freedoms without responsibility, arrogance without humility, debauchery without self-control? Do you have the spiritual fortitude necessary to trust God, his principles, and the hope he offers? Do you? On fidelity. And fidelity is such a critical thing these days. And I don't mean between man and wife. I mean fidelity on all levels. Will you be faithful to your vows, obligations, duties, observances, the Pledge of Allegiance, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution of the United States of America? Will you show fidelity? On forbearance, are you prepared to accept political setbacks, betrayal, and flat-out indifference? And when necessary, do you have the character, my friend? Do you have the character to delay personal or professional gratification? And do you have the humility to seek forgiveness when you act as judge and jury, poison others with your words, are hostile and bitter, filled with self-interest, or suspicious of others' good fortune? And should your colleagues demonstrate these same weaknesses? Can you? Are you capable? Are you willing to forgive their transgressions? And on social justice, do you support equal access to education, economics, healthcare, criminal justice, regardless of race or religion or culture? Are you also willing to trump the demand for tolerance when common sense and or the loss of America's founding principles are at risk? Will you stand up? Can you say these things? Are you worthy? Are you worthy of my trust? My trust in voting for you, that in effect puts the trust of my children and grandchildren in your hands. Are you worthy of my trust?
That's what I'm talking about.
Consider this if you're going to run for public office. I'm Steve Gruber. This is The Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart.
A while back, I wrote an op-ed piece.
Closer to the heart.
And, you know, I did it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I was also serious. I wrote that someday soon we could find that our campfires have been outlawed because they create too much smoke, and therefore we couldn't have campfires. And of course, if your marshmallow caught on fire, that could produce toxins that would be harmful to the environment, and therefore it would be illegal. And the EPA would be at the campfires confiscating s'mores. I said it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of truth to it. You see, the EPA is like rust. It never sleeps. It's always working its way to the point of least resistance and working its way in. And now, campfires, maybe not quite yet, but these outside wood burners, They could be illegal. In fact, all sorts of places in Michigan might find themselves that they're counties that are completely not in compliance. And you think I'm joking? You think I'm wrong? Well, I'm not. And my next guest, Dr. Tom Borelli, here to talk more about it. Tom, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me back.
And I wrote that piece about campfires and so forth, and I said it somewhat jokingly, but I said it as I watched the insidious advance of the EPA taking ever more liberties, wanting to control my mud puddles. And if they want to control my mud puddles, why wouldn't they come after my campfire and my s'mores? And frankly, here they are on the doorstep, right?
No, absolutely. And a couple of weeks ago, the EPA finalized its ozone rule, which is really going to be harmful for the country and especially for Michigan. Ground-level ozone is a main component of smog, so EPA wants to regulate that. Look, we don't want a lot of that around either. But the amount of ozone since 1980 has decreased 33%. So the regulations in place are working. And the level they just reduced it from, now, hold on to your seat there. The standard was at 75 parts per billion. They lowered it to 70 parts per billion. Now, parts per billion is 1 times 10 to the minus 9th, right? A lot of zeros.
Sure.
Even more amazing is there are areas in the country where the background level of ozone approach that number. And some of those areas actually in the West are in our national parks. So that's how how low they're regulating.
My math isn't that strong, Tom, so help out the average guy here. Make it in English, if you will. What does it mean?
Well, what it means is that it is the amount of ozone we're exposed to is so small, and they're even reducing the level even more that counties would have to meet. And again, the background levels are about as much, so you can't regulate a substance lower than its natural background level. But
right, so what you're saying here is
pushing us towards that. And for Michigan, what this means is that many of the counties in Michigan will be non-attainment, the fancy word, which means they can't meet that standard. When you can't
non-compliant,
meet that standard,
we're in violation. We'd be in violation. We're non-compliant.
What happens is then the state and the county at the county level have to reduce the elements that create ozone, and those like motor vehicle exhaust or emissions from factories. So what this means is that factories will not be able to expand because it would increase the amount of ozone in the area if you're in violation of the standard. It means that you won't be able to...
Okay, so hold on. Stop right there. Hold on. Stop. We're on the line with Tom Borelli here. So let me break it down and make it real basic then. If you can't reduce basically below the baseline of what would exist if there were no people here at all, then you're telling me that we could not expand a factory. We couldn't bring any business, and likely we would run businesses out. But that's going to happen all over the country because it's not just Michigan. It'll be Ohio and Indiana, Wisconsin, and apparently Yellowstone National Park in Montana won't be compliant because of all the sulfur in the air from the geysers and so forth. You're basically saying America is not compliant.
Another example in your introduction, this is EPA out of control, and if you're General Motors, if you're Ford, if you're Chrysler, where are you going to build a factory when you can't get a permit in Michigan? Where are you going to go? You're going to go to Mexico and China. And ironically, some of the ozone and the elements that create ozone come from Asia, which we have no control over.
It's unfathomable. I mean, how can you? What are you going to go cite Old Faithful and put a restricted zone tape around it? Do not enter, dangerous to your health. I mean, seriously.
But you mentioned it really in the intro. The bottom line is this is sheer anti-development. They don't want you to use land. They don't want you to develop an economy. The environmental zealots just want all nature all the time. And
make no mistake. One of the major tenets, one of the foundations, one of the pillars of Marxism is Mother Earth. Anybody can go look this up. That was one of his deals to control the population, was through this environmental, Nazism. And that's what this is. It's not about clean air. It's about controlling people, as near as I can tell.
No, absolutely. And they claim that, look, a lot of ozone is not good for people. There's no doubt about that. But again, it's down 33%. And they make claims that ozone contributes to asthma. But look, asthma has been going up and ozone's been going down. So there are a lot of questions about what they're really doing and why. But again, and what's really tragic about this, it's the cities who are going to be hurt the most because there's a lot of automobiles obviously driving in cities. So either you're going to have to restrict driving, or you're going to make sure that no factory can ever expand or no building could ever be built. And what's that going to do for the employment in Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, where they're already, high unemployment, where the black community is outraged because they can't get a job, and so they get involved in selling drugs, which leads to crime. I mean, this is an ever-spiraling downturn, all because of this government that's gone wild.
I think building windmills creates an ozone problem. The construction of windmills in the pursuit of an unattainable green energy supply creates ozone problems. Tom, I just don't know where to... some days it just gives me a headache, and I wish I had more time, but we'll have you back very soon, my friend. Great topic, bad for Michigan, and just unattainable. Dr. Tom Borelli, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve.
You have it. It doesn't make any sense, my friends. At some point you say enough. Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in. Keep trucking, like the Dog Man together.
33 after the hour. It's the Steve Gruber Show, and I'll have some comments coming up at the top of the third hour. I keep getting these comments from hardcore conservatives about a couple of things, and I'm going to respond to a couple of those things. So, we'll talk about that. And the hotline number, 888-900-9966, you'll want that. I'm sick of debating ridiculous things, and we'll get to that. One of the things I consider to be completely ridiculous is this notion, and put forth by Republicans and some Democrats, is that somehow labeling our food with country of origin labeling and so forth is an impediment to free trade. Balderdash, I say. That's nonsense. I'd like to know if my steak came from Kansas. I'd like to know if my pork came from Michigan. I'd like to know where my eggs come from. When you look at things like the contamination rate of shrimp that come from Vietnam, almost 80% contamination rate. Don't you think I'm entitled to know where my shrimp come from? Because as a consumer, I do. Bob Thompson joining me now, the president of the Michigan Farmers Union, to talk more about it. Bob, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Steve. I appreciate it.
How in the world, by slapping a Made in Michigan tag on a package of grass-fed ground beef or pork or raspberries or apples or any other damn thing, how does that impede trade in any way?
I don't see that it does. I share the same view. Our organization shares the same view. As farmers, we want to be able to identify what we're producing. We produce a high-quality class product, and I think that the American farmer deserves the right to put that label on that package so that the American consumer has the knowledge to make an informed decision when they decide what to buy.
Yeah, Made in America means something, doesn't it? And let's be honest, my friend. The American farmer, helped out by companies like the one in Moline, Illinois, better known as John Deere, have created an opportunity to feed the world. I mean, I've traveled. I've been to Argentina. I've been to Africa. You know what I see? I see John Deere tractors planting crops with seeds from the United States that have been tested by American farmers and proven to be reliable and consistent and, and drought resistant and pest resistant. In the 1970s, the people on the left were telling us that we were all going to starve to death because we couldn't feed ourselves. Well, the American farmer, along with American technology, and John Deere is my easiest example, American technology both in the machinery and the seeds we use have fed the world, have they not, Bob?
Oh, absolutely. American agriculture has grown leaps and bounds. We have done everything we can do to enhance our industry within the states, and as you say, it's migrated around the world, and not just through John Deere, but like you say, the other aspects of agriculture, seed development, and the like, chemical development, safe chemicals, etc.
Yeah. So, why the fear? Do you think then? Yeah, and I've had this. Trust me. I get this push more from Republicans than Democrats about, well, we don't need to label things because it's an impediment to trade. It's a non-starter. It makes no sense. There is no common sense attached to that. And one of those people is going to be on the program here in just a few minutes. Congressman Tim Walberg said that we don't need this sort of labeling because it stands in the way of trade, free trade. Nonsense. I'm not less inclined to buy something because it says Australia, but I might look at the shrimp twice from Vietnam because I know the contamination rates. And I think I have a right as a consumer. If I'm going to feed that to my family, I need to know that.
Well, and I think the only impediment to free trade might be the fact that the World Trade Organization has ruled against our mandatory label legislation that Representative Walberg and his colleagues have seen fit to repeal in the House of Representatives. While there is a much more salvageable arrangement that has been offered by Senator Hoeven of North Dakota and Senator Stabenow of Michigan, that would, rather than have the mandatory label, it would be a voluntary label, which would put it almost lockstep in line with what the Canadians use to this day. And
are you okay with it? Let me ask you, are you okay with voluntary labeling?
The Board of Directors of the National Farmers Union has, with considerable debate, agreed with the voluntary labeling from the standpoint that it is the last game in town. The World Trade Organization has ruled on several occasions that our laws currently on the books violate WTO process and rules. And we're waiting anxiously for the WTO to set a final date. Well, they have set a final date, of December 7th, where the cool arbitration has been in consideration.
Which is country of origin labeling, cool, COOL, country of origin label. You know, it just it doesn't make any sense here, Bob. Let's just cut right to it. You know, if you make something somewhere, we have to, by law, we have to label our cars and car parts and the content of our Ford and our Chevy and our Chrysler. You know, and I have to know where that comes from by law so that jobs are protected. But shouldn't we be protecting the jobs of those that work in agriculture in America just the same? I think we should. And I just got a comment from one of our listeners. Jim said, you know, if my food's coming from China, I want to know that so I can buy something else, and I agree with that. And now you've got plans to ship, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, whole chicken carcasses to China for processing, then to be shipped back to the United States. I'm sorry. If you're shipping meat back and forth across the ocean, isn't the contamination rate there potentially to be a lot higher as well? I mean, I'd rather pay an extra 50 cents a pound than have salmonella for dinner.
Absolutely. There needs to be a rational labeling process. While mandatory is our preferred vehicle, the voluntary process will work, in our opinion, because the American consumer is going to demand it. In polling over a 10-year period has said that 90% of the American consumer wants to know where their food comes from, and we believe that they should have that.
I demand it, actually. Yeah, I demand that I know where my food comes from. All right. Bob, you've got my vote. Bob Thompson, the president of the Michigan Farmers Union. Not only should we know where our food comes from for our own safety, I'd like to support Michigan farmers. I do that by knowing where things come from. I greatly appreciate your time, Bob.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to you sometime soon as well. Keep that phone number on speed dial because we'll have more questions for Bob Thompson and other farmers in the future. 41 after on this Thursday. It's October the 22nd on the Steve Gruber Show.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of...
It's 45 after on this Thursday. The Common Sense Hotline, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. The federal government chimed in and told the state of Michigan well over half a year ago that the chemistry of the Flint water was apparently causing transmission pipes to leach contaminants such as lead and other heavy metals into city water. That, according to emails among environmental regulators, a big concern there in Flint as we continue to battle with that problem and try to come up with a long-term solution. Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich is here with us again today. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Give me an idea here, Senator. What's the latest in the water contamination situation in Flint? Where are we today?
Well, when I'm home, I just left from driving to Lansing. When I left this morning, if I turn the water on, Detroit water is flowing through the pipes. The Flint water is sort of, been flushed out. Now, I think people need to make sure they understand that it's still going to take a few more weeks or if not longer to make sure that the corrosion control that's in the Detroit water that still unbelievable to me and everyone else wasn't in the Flint water, will recoat the pipes and basically allow us to have safe drinking water. That's going to take some time still. So people still need to take precautions, using filters, flushing the water before they use it. But it's starting to assist that part of the problem is starting to be rectified, and hopefully we'll have that resolved quickly.
So the long term of this, Senator, because that's really the long term, and we're looking at, well, whether it's Detroit or Flint or a host of cities in Michigan, you're looking at antiquated delivery systems for fresh water and other infrastructure challenges that we face here, I think it's fair to say. So as you look at the long term of fresh water in Flint or Bay City or Saginaw, anywhere, in that part of the state that was built, 100 years ago or more in many instances, we've got some challenges ahead, do we not?
Yeah, it's not just Michigan. It's going to be nationwide. There's no question that the infrastructure, not just the roads, but what's underneath the roads, the water and sewer pipes in many parts of this country, and many of our old industrial cities are just old and they're outdated. And at some point in time, we're going to have to make a real concerted effort to fix those. That's sort of my long-term goal. Something we're going to have to work on. That's going to have to happen to help from Washington D.C. And so God knows when that may happen. But right now it's just now that we've got a fresh, a clean source of drinking water that we're now using. Now it's coming down to the answer of how did this happen? Who knew when? And then what? Who's going to be held accountable for that? And then what recommendations?
Nobody's held accountable.
Brought forward to fix it.
Nobody's ever held accountable. That's the problem. And that's the complaint of the American voters. Nobody's ever held accountable. Politicians come and go, and I'm not targeting you, sir. I'm just saying in general that's the opinion of the people. Politicians come and go, and nobody's held accountable. We get stuck with the bill. Yeah, that's why the voters are angry. But let me ask you something. Let me back up real quick here, Senator. And we're on the line here with Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich of talking about the Flint water problem. The comment you made, this is your long-term plan and part of your long-term solution, right? That's what you just mentioned. That sounds like somebody who would be running for governor.
No. I'm just trying to. I live in Flint.
Oh, come on.
My family does. I have a 12-week-old. I just want clean water for my citizens. I'm not announcing for any other office. I'll tell you right now.
Well, then why are you blushing? Hold on. So I can hear you blushing right now. Yeah, I can hear you blushing right now. Anyhow, and you make the drive to Lansing every day anyway.
It's not something I'm thinking about right now. I'll say that.
All right, fair enough. that's what it sounded like to me. All right, so we look at these infrastructure problems. And it's not just water. It's electrical delivery. And here in Michigan, and I have to ask you about this because it's a conversation that's been going on this program and around the state and among people at the kitchen table for a long time now, and that is we're closing 9 coal-fired power plants in Michigan. We're losing 1.5 gigawatts of power. 60 plants are closing across the Midwest. And in April, one of the VPs of Consumers Energy said rolling blackouts could become the normal in mid-2016 in Michigan. And I'm like, really? How could this be possible in America that rolling blackouts would even be part of a discussion when it comes to the grid in Michigan?
Well, I think it goes back to the point we were talking about earlier, the point you made. For a long time, we've never held anybody accountable. And when it comes to infrastructure, whether it's electrical or sewer and water or roads, the voters have allowed us, I mean, I'm speaking all of us, I'm myself included in there, even though I voted for a number of plans, have allowed us to not do our jobs. And, right now, there's an energy policy being debated, and I think it's important that citizens get involved in that, make sure that we actually have a long-term plan to make sure we have reliable and cost-effective energy going forward, because that's
Let me ask you this.
Problem. I mean, yeah.
Have we gone too far? Has the EPA gone too far? Have we gone too far towards green energy too fast and put ourselves in a bad position?
No, I think we can come up with a solution that helps us reduce, energy waste, some of the issues that are affecting our environment, and at the same time provide reliable energy. I think in 2015, I think we have the technology now in place to make sure that we have reliable sources of energy, and I think we're going to. I hope that as a body that we come up with that solution. And I think in the Midwest, we have a system where the energy is shared back and forth when there's excess. I think that my understanding is what I've seen.
But when 60 plants are closed, how do you get there?
In many cases.
Yeah, I don't know how you share when 60 plants get shut down.
Folks are saying that there has been excess energy that could be distributed. There's some issues. I mean, we got to have a sound energy policy. Right, I tell you right now, I'm just trying to make sure I got clean drinking water in my community.
No, I understand.
Energy is important to me, but I got to make sure I focus on that. So that's what I'm focused on.
Well, I understand,
now.
but that all comes back to infrastructure and baseline, and I appreciate that, Senator, because it's about clean drinking water, it's about good roads, it's about electricity, it's about infrastructure in general, and just a lot of things that are going on.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time, Senator, and I'd like to have you back soon to further this discussion because they're all important. So thank you very much.
It's a really important one, and we got to make sure we do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich. A variety of challenges and things that concern us all. Now, how we solve those problems may differentiate us, but we all identify these as critical problems. Thursday, it's the Steve Gruber Show.